Good evening, everybody. We've got a lot of space now right up in the front, so if you would like to just move forward, please do so. We just would love to feel that we are talking to a bigger audience. Give us more confidence. Don't be shy. Dancers don't bite. Please do feel free to move forward. Occupy all this wonderful space right up here. I'd definitely like to say as an audience, and I believe this is on behalf of everyone who is here as an audience, thank you, NYUAD, Van Cleef, everyone who has made this evening possible. Truly splendid. Very rarely do you get to witness things that truly help expand your mind, and I'm sure all of us here would agree that that's happened. A round of applause, one just to kind of like cheer them on. Some incredible work that we've witnessed here today, and especially for this part of the world. So hey, I'm so glad I'm getting to ask this question to you. How exactly have these pieces contributed to you as an individual?
Wow. Hi, everyone. I'm Charlotte, the artistic director of Candoco Dance Company. How have these pieces influenced me? Well, I'd say that the first piece, which is Candoco's version of the original Set and Reset by Trisha Brown Dance Company, has been a huge influence on me as a dancer and artist. I think when I was in contemporary dance training, much of what we were learning was based on the movement language and some of the compositional principles that are embodied in the first piece, Set and Reset. I think Trisha's work has really influenced postmodern dance all over the world. And then the second piece by Jeanine Durning is very close to my heart and is actually, I would say, offers strategies for living as well as for dancing. So Jeanine Durning has danced for the choreographer Deborah Hay for over 30 years. And though she has a very distinct choreographic voice, her work with Deborah has inevitably influenced her own work. And I have also performed Deborah Hay's work, and so I felt very passionately about sharing some of those values, perhaps, of the second piece, which is completely unset. And so it offers us a way to live and navigate our way through the unknown, which supports me hugely as an individual in these uncertain times.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I believe Set Reset was originally choreographed, what, 35 years ago?
Yeah, 1983.
83, so that's 38, 39 years ago, close to 40 years ago. Okay, my math's not great. We're not here for that. Hey, Joel. Hey. Hi.
Water. And
Water. Very important.
Thank you.
Yeah. We loved watching you on stage. Thank you so much for that splendid performance. Thank you very much. Just quickly going back to Set Reset, were there any particular challenges, or were there any new things that were discovered in the process of reconstructing it so many years after it was originally choreographed? What do you feel?
I think Joel, who has more direct experience, could say more, but I could certainly say that my predecessors that decided to restage this work really wanted to show the world the kind of process that Candoco is engaged in every day, in exploring what is possible. individually and together. And so I think the opportunity to access such a seminal work and to bring our own knowledge and expertise to it was really wonderful. And I think the learning was mutual, both for our dancers and for the Trisha Brown Company, who were working with us to discover what this version would be. It was definitely a shared sense of discovery and joy at what we discovered.
Joel, anything to add?
I think certainly, I guess the biggest challenge is on taking a pre-existing work on a company like Candoco is the diversity of bodies, modalities, disabilities, physicalities. And so that inherently means, like, everybody has to learn the choreography, and the choreography is incredibly rich and dense and enriching and for everybody. But if you have some disability, then you have to go through many more layers of translation, which is a kind of different creative energy you have to do, and then you have to remember the translation, and then you anyway, there's translation is difficult. Learning is difficult. And that learning isn't the same for everybody. So in terms of learning the choreography or the phrase, obviously that is challenging. But I've been doing it now for almost 7 years, and I really have loved it, and I am continuously learning with it. What's fun about the piece? Well, there's lots of things that's fun about the piece, but the piece at its heart has there's a lot of improvisation and play in it, and the most important part of the piece are these kind of choreographic rules around lining up and playing with the edges of the space and acting on instinct and keeping it simple and playing with being visible and stuff. So the work, the foundation of the choreography is really tight, and so in terms of the difficulties of translations, that's just always difficult anyway. So then you slot it in with the work, and I think it holds it really well.
I love the fact that you use the words translation, diversity, different bodies. I think it leads into the next question. Do you think there are things that are underrated and or overrated in inclusive choreography and inclusive dance?
I'm going to let Joel start on this one. Oh, I'm going to let Joel start on this one because I'm sure he has a lengthy list.
I think this came out of our dinner the other night, right?
It did.
I think I made a statement. So translation, we know what the word means, like translating something from language to language. And we usually use that word in dance. We can use that for everybody, right? Like somebody has a dance, and I'm going to learn that dance, and so everybody goes through a process of translation. But if you're in a wheelchair, then that translation process is much bigger. And I've been dancing full-time for 10 years now, and I think the statement I made is that translation is overrated. And I think when I said that, I'm drawing on like a decade of experience of morning class or choreography or lots of things where you spend so much time trying to translate in the moment that you can miss out on a lot of really nuanced and important things that are how your body works. So when I say it's overrated, I think it's because there's like this kind of keeping up process out of necessity that's really not that fun. But you also, you have something to say. Maybe. You also have something, a question about something that's underrated. So maybe. either. So,
Are there things that are underrated in inclusive choreography or inclusive dancing?
It's a tricky question. I was thinking back over the 30 years of Candoco's history. We were 30 years old last year, and I was one of the founder members in the company then. And at that time, we were really wanting to just dance. And so we felt that the kind of disability narrative that was being attached to us and some of the dancers, or the critics only spoke about the kind of individual stories rather than the work. So we felt that those were overrated. However, now I'm learning all the time, and the world is changing all the time, and now we're recognizing more and more that there are many voices that are missing. There are many, there is a distinct lack of disabled dancers and disabled choreographers. And so now I wouldn't say that I think that's true. I think that, we need more diverse voices making work to keep expanding our art form and our perception of dance.
Agreed, 100%. And based on that, here's another question, something that I feel a lot of these tiny discussions in and around this region usually dwells on. Content or form? What do you think is important in the dialogue between dancers and dance audience?
Like choreographic form versus content, like what are you actually doing?
What are you trying to, because some people stress a lot about, what are they trying to say? And just don't allow for the moment to just sink in. And sometimes people are just so carried away, mesmerized by the lines and curves and everything else that, you just don't take a moment to sit with the story.
It's complex because I think every art form, not just dance, is a dialogue between content and form. I come from a family of visual artists, and we talk about this a lot. And, is the content narrative or figurative? Is it abstract? And of course, one informs the other. I think what's exciting about working in more inclusive dance is that the form itself is being developed and the aesthetic is evolving. The form might be the choreographic form, or it might be the form of a body. Classical ballet relied on was built around a very particular physical form, a normative body. And I think inclusive dance is doing something, and particularly disabled artists are really evolving our sense of form or our traditional perceptions of form or even beauty. So I think it's a massive question, and yeah, I'm only just scratching the surface of it.
Joel, anything?
Next, I need
Next
a PhD.
question.
It's yeah.
Too deep?
Too deep.
Sorry about that. Something that did stand out with both the performances this evening, for me personally, simplicity and silence, and it just came right out from each one of you, and the whole the way the pieces just developed on stage, and had me so engaged. Every single second, I had goosebumps, and there were moments where I was just in awe of the simplicity and the silence. That's what stood out for me. How important are these two things in creating inclusive work or any art, and as an artist?
I think they're very special ingredients. So silence, simplicity, patience is a word I like very much. These are all words, and we can have different connotations to them. But it's important. And I don't like, and simplicity is also complex. Silence in music is incredibly important. So
I think we appreciate one when in contrast with the other, don't we? I think the reason or certainly for myself, the reason I appreciate the silence or the moments of stillness, I know you didn't say stillness, but in the works are because the works are both so dense and so complex. And so, it's against one that we can appreciate the other. But I don't think it's particular to inclusive dance. What I enjoy about this particular program is that it shows a whole range of movement possibilities and doesn't value one over another. So when I think about the simplicity of movement and the complexity of movement, what I learn in watching these two pieces side by side is that both are equally virtuosic and both are equally complex, and one movement is no better or worse than another. So that's what your question leads me to.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I'm very curious to understand, Joel, more from you, the idea of unstoppable and to not dwell on decision-making, but to go with movement. How challenging and enriching is that idea for you as a dancer?
Can I clarify what you mean by unstoppable? You mean a kind of, because in the work, in the second piece, it's about non-stopping. And you mean unstoppable in that context?
That context,
oh,
purely.
okay, very good.
Yeah.
I thought you meant in life what makes me unstoppable. And
you can do what you like in life.
I think non-stopping is harder than it sounds. It's also, I think it is what it says it is. I've really appreciated practicing non-stopping regularly as a way to sort of bypass ideas or judgments that you might have about the moment. And I think the idea of non-stopping is what, and then through Jeanine's refining in specific scores and how to apply it, choreographic form comes out of a commitment to non-stopping and the various scores and games that we play where that's the foundation of. And your question is what helps me to non-stop?
Yeah, how is it challenging? I kind of sensed it as almost getting out of your own way. Like, a bigger picture would be that.
I think that is part of it. Yeah. I think it's a tool that Jeanine has designed to uncensor movement and speaking, and to, purposely, by keeping on moving, you're not leaving room for doubt, or you're trying to reduce the possibility for doubt to creep in and judge what you're doing. It supports you to get in the flow. And as dancers, we realize that our bodies are often ahead of our minds anyway, and are processing more rapidly than our thinking. And so it's a way of the body teaching the mind and informing our perception, keeping it in flow.
So trusting the body almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's brilliant. Also, like you said, I think every location, every venue, it's a different, obviously it's different. It's not like set. Of course, there
every
are the
moment.
guidelines. Every moment. Do you think the geography that it's performed in has an impact on the dancers or the performance itself? I heard a lot of sand today.
The geography of the space.
Yeah, where the stage, like this is the UAE, so there's a lot of sand. I heard a lot of sand in this choreography. So it was in, I don't know, Alaska. Would there be ice or snow? Or
I don't know, but I would love to hear what people here.
I mean, I don't know either, but I can certainly say that sitting in the audience here in Abu Dhabi was a completely new experience of the work for me. And of course, that's just my perception. But I think it has a huge influence. Each audience, every audience is different, every context is different, and the dancers are living, breathing, moving beings in that different context. So, yeah, it has a huge influence, and my ability to read audiences is challenged all the time because, you know, different cultures have different responses and different ways of showing how they feel, and so I couldn't say that I know how an audience feels, you know. I certainly felt a kind of I had a heightened sense of in the second piece of, you know, what is actually happening, you know, the risk involved in not knowing what's coming next or why. And that's not always a comfortable feeling. But then life is not always comfortable either. And so somehow this piece speaks to me of my experience of these times.
Yeah. And Joel, something to add? Perfect. So we've got, just because we are forced to wrap this great conversation, if there was one thing that you really, really want the audience this evening to take home with them from this experience, what would it be from both of y'all if you had just one word to share?
One word?
Two, if you would like.
If it was one word, I'd say possibility, a sense of possibility.
Joel?
I don't know, I just hope you liked it.
Did we like it? We loved it. We do have time for a few questions from the audience. Oh, yes, we do have one show of hand there.
Hello, good evening. I have a question. So as a former dancer, you talked about play and 4 elements in set and reset, because I've done some of Trisha's work that was improv in the moment because of our names. So they would call my name and I had a phrase, and then we'd all do that phrase. But with a wheelchair on stage, with someone also with crutches, with all of this wonderful things going on, I was astounded that there was that, I forgot about Trisha's work, that there was that level of improv on stage. Talk to us about, well, obviously sometimes there are accidents that happen because dancers fall down all the time, but the discovery of this work on the dancers, how did you feel setting it? How was the play involved? Can you tell the audience a little bit more about the play that's involved in both pieces, I'm sure. But I had forgotten it wasn't all choreography. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to go out and do the same thing every night. That set changes every time. So I would love for you to share that with us this evening.
Well, I'm sorry to break your heart, but it's actually the same every night. Well, you mean Trisha's work, the first work. Yeah, Trisha's work, it is set. So Trisha made a phrase, okay? And everybody learned that phrase. And then, in the creation of the work, the dancers improvised with the material by sticking to the edge, one of her rules. And then by recording it and doing things again, then they set it. So they would set and then reset it. So just to clarify that it has an improvisational feel. It was sort of constructed through that, but it is set now.
yes, definitely, it came out of play and improvisation. So you see moments of collision and, you know, spaces opening up and closing, or the dancers dodging through. But I also am thinking about one of the founder members of Trisha Brown Dance Company called Eva Karjak, who was in the making of Set and Reset, has been teaching the company morning class over this last year. And she's really shared her direct experience of that process. And I think, I don't know, Joel, because you've been doing many reiterations of the piece, but I observed that she's brought more play and more freedom to the dancer's embodiment of the material.
Yeah, I think that's true. A little more info, I think it'll be interesting for context, is when Candoco first made a Set and Reset, we didn't make the exact version. It's Set, Reset, Reset, which means it's the same phrase material. The form of the piece is the same, but the actual specific interactions were then again built like they were in 1983 through play. So there's a section where we're on that wall. We call it wall 1, and we play with specific material in that, and then stuff was set. So Candoco, and then when new cast members have come, especially like when I came 7 years ago, like anyway, with new dancers, and then with the context of Candoco, people have different physicalities and disabilities, then those needs for translations and differences open up. So you have to continuously play. And even though it is quite set from what it was before, there is little differences.
Any other, yeah, one more question, a few more questions.
Good evening. So my question is about storytelling. And as dancers, you tell us stories, right? And when you share stories, every story has a purpose. But as a creative writer, I just realized that sometimes I intend to say one thing, and my purpose of saying it is one, but the way how the audience receives it is very different. So how important is it for you so that the audience gets your purpose? And how much scope do you leave for exploration and interpretation?
Great question. I think the thing is that dance is a live art form, so it's not something you can control. It lives in the space between the performers and the audience. And so however much an artist might want to express something or have a choreographic purpose, we never know quite how it's going to land or be received by the viewer. But I do think that for me it's about intention, clarity of intention. And maybe it's just a language difference. And this, I think, is the clearer the choreographic intention, the more powerful the impact, or more the clearer the expression. I don't know, I'm not being very, very clear. But for me, it's about clarity of choreographic intent.
That makes sense. That actually does make a lot of sense. As a dancer, someone who would like to work, like, intention is so key. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Brilliant answer. One more question. Where's the mic? If someone can pass the mic along to the lady here.
Hi, I have a question for the second piece. So watching it, I felt as if I was in a play area with the kids, and while you're watching them, they just explore everything and anything with their bodies and the objects around them. And also the idea of touch, many times one pushing the other, one pulling the one helping the other one. So it was wonderful. and it was as pure and as innocent as you watch kids. But the ending, usually what happens, you're just pulling the kid out of the play area and he's like howling and crying while going. So I want to understand, how does your, like, I'm also a dancer coming from a classical Indian background, so the beginning and end is always very essential. So how do you craft that, you know? How does that happen? Is it the same, like pulling in? How do you do that? Because, you know, once you're in the process and doing the work, it's very difficult to, I'm sure you have developed a chemistry between each other, and that helps, but I would like to understand it from you, or hear it out from you.
As a performer that's in it, it's honestly, it's quite difficult to read sometimes the big picture of what's happening. Because, as you know, it is quite live, so the ending isn't always the same. However, we did land Jeanine and the composer. Sometimes the composer and I would play music together in lunch, and so they wanted me to sing at the end. So that's like a kind of a, I'm improvising, like whatever I'm saying and sing it, like, you know, it's part of the game. But for me, that is set as a kind of a music. Well, it's music, but music is an idea that she talks about and plays with in terms of dance and in the piece as well. So she wanted a kind of like a direct music to mirror or reverberate with all of the other music, not just sound, but all the music that we've been playing. But there's a lot of bigger, I'm going to hand it to Charlotte, or even...
No, it's fine. I was going to ask you, maybe it's helpful as well to share the opening score, because even though the movement is not set, there is a very clear sequence that the dancers use as an anchor or a directive, but they also can break it. Any one person can shift off and on back to the score. But there is a clear score for the opening, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, in the opening, we set up a situation with objects, one at a time. What happened tonight? I came out first with a microphone, but on another night, someone who brings out the table, or anyway, we set up a situation in the space. I think tonight it was sort of there, but sometimes it's another place. And once we sort of feel the situation is set up, then we make another situation. Then we change the furniture, we change the living room, and then a game happens, and then stuff starts to unfold.
And the end, there is, apart from Joel singing, which he's spoken about, the end is perhaps the most open part, because the dancers by then, you know, have exuded an enormous amount of energy through moving, speaking, all the decisions that they're making moment to moment. And so she wanted to leave space for the human, each of them individually, to just see what can unfold when you sort of get beyond that place where you can control it. I haven't quite said it, but so there's an enormous amount of freedom, and it's where, for me, it becomes very touching, and the unexpected really can happen there, and intimate moments can appear and disappear.
Fantastic. I think that's definitely working with intentions. I think the intentions there is the beginning and the end, perhaps not set in stone. That's what, and the boundaries are moving, but the boundaries are still very clear, both to the artists and the choreographer and everything. There's this brilliant, ingenious harmony that just exists within all of this. It's been a great evening. Thank you all for joining us and for being here. Round of applause to this fantastic company for the fantastic performance. Have a great evening, guys.